Speed up go-to-market with enhanced DevOps, AWS best practices. I'm proud to present our speakers, Kevin Rice-on-Chu, co-founder and CTO, Stratus 10, Joe Kramer, Director of Engineering at Peachjar, and John Boynton, Global Business Development Leader for AWS EdStart. Our agenda today will begin with an overview of DevOps, why it matters, and improvements to make. Containers, best practices, and pitfalls to avoid. A case from AWS customer Peachjar and their AWS experience. AWS funding programs, a Q&A, and other resources available. I'll now hand it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so let's jump right in and discuss about DevOps and why it matters. Okay, so DevOps increases an organization's agility and it decreases their failure rate. So anytime you have a development or an organization and you're working on a piece of software, embracing DevOps will make your organization more functional. Okay. The most effective change management is achieved by firms that emphasize a high degree of testing and deployment automation, a high degree of automated risk mitigation, having less rigid and less manual approval processes along the way, implementing all your changes as code versus manual changes, and employing your employees or allowing your employees to have more scope to influence the change management. And finally, it's having a DevOps process and a culture that really drives adoption within an organization. So we're going to look at why use AWS tools for DevOps versus picking and choosing different providers and trying to merge them together. Basically, AWS has developed these tools as an end-to-end solution, and they're designed to work together. So from the CI/CD process to observability to infrastructure as code and to dev and testing, including security. You can build a very mature DevOps practice using exclusively or predominantly AWS tools with all their native integrations. Where there are gaps, there's integrations to other top vendors if you're looking for some sort of interconnects. And you know that with AWS, because all the tools are working side by side, hand in hand, there's also an element of security that's been taken care of for you, so you have less worry about, is your data leaving your network while it's being built or deployed, etc. Another good thing is that AWS pushes for ML and AWS best practices within their tools. So a lot of the expertise that's normally needed to fix issues, etc., is taken care of for you within the tools themselves. As far as pricing goes, they're fairly competitive with their pricing, and you do get a very low TOC, especially because it's pay as you go. So you're not having to commit to, a license or anything like that in the long term. So, and it's really built with the developer and the organization in mind. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of, well, what all is included, here's a high level of all the AWS services. You can see, it spans from all the way from the start when you're writing the software until you've fully deployed it, and now you're monitoring and watching how things are running. Okay, so if you already have a DevOps process and you're looking to bring it to the next level, then definitely consider adding security into your DevOps model. So what that looks like is, you're going to run with much more restricted access, least privileged. You want to make sure that your containers are limited in scope on what they can do. So if you think of like a large build server like Jenkins, it has to give many development teams access across the board. The high-profile SolarWinds breach is believed to have been based on an overly permissive security access within the CI/CD pipeline. So whereas contrasting an AWS DevOps tool, it's automatically scoped to the project. So it's very easy to make sure that only the right people have that access. You don't have to give everybody, all of your developers, access to the tools. You're storing all your information safely in the cloud. A lot of customers say they don't want to risk having sensitive information on their employees' laptops or on premise in local environments, and they'd rather keep it all within AWS. So that's, and then you can protect it using your enterprise single sign-on or some other mechanism for securing authorization and access. So you also want to run your application within a private VPC. So no traffic over the public internet, keep everything there. Your customers prefer to keep their credentials and source controls, source codes secured by themselves in their local environments. Other customers utilizing CI/CD tools, they offer VPC endpoints, which make it so you don't have to expose your sensitive information out to the public internet. Be sure you're scanning for vulnerabilities all the time. Code Guru Reviewer Security Detector is one of the newer tools, and it automates reasoning and improves your code security. ECR, which is the repository for container images, now also has artifact security scanning of the images. So, and the beauty is AWS also handles all the patching for all these tools that you're using. Whereas, you know, if you're running a Jenkins server on your own, you're going to have to worry about patching it, making sure the box itself is secured, all the software running on it, etc. So keep that in mind. Okay. One other option that you can also do is segregate out your DevOps and make the application development team separate from the infrastructure team that builds all the tools for those application developers. So they'll take care of, the infrastructure team will take care of the managing, the provisioning, securing the cloud resources, so that the build team just has to worry about, just has to focus on writing the code and kicking off the deploys and delivering that business value to your customers. So we're going to dig in a little bit into the core components that make up the build process. So first is code commit, which is a Git repository hosting your code. It works with any of your existing Git tools because it is a Git repository. It integrates in with AWS services that are management services, so IAM, EventBridge, SNS, notifications, etc. There's no hardware to provision and scale. So typically, if you're running a Jenkins server, you kind of have to coordinate your builds and stuff with all the other development teams. With code commit, you don't have any of that. You just check your code in, and they manage it all for you. And it's backed by S3. So looking at code build, same thing, you know, fully managed build service, compiles your source code, runs your tests, produce software packages for you. It scales continuously, so you don't have to worry about it. There's no build server to manage. You're paying by the minute, and you monitor through CloudWatch events how your build is going. Code deploy, obviously, does what it says, automates your code deploys to any instance or even Lambda functions. It handles complexities of updating your application. You don't have to worry about downtime during an application deploy. Rollbacks are automatic if a failure is detected. And like I mentioned, you deploy to EC2, deploy to Lambda, but you can also deploy to on-premise servers if you need. And then code pipeline manages all of that above. So it continues to deliver service for fast and reliable application updates. You can model and visualize your software release process. It coordinates the build, test, deploy of your code every time there is a code change, and it integrates with other third-party tools in case you need to run things like coverage or what have you. So why do you use containers, or what's the advantages of using containers versus deploying straight to EC2 instances or bare metal? Well, the containers are immutable, they're fast, and they're scalable. So immutability, basically, it guarantees that once you've built your container image, it'll never change. It allows you to create a consistent image, and then you deploy that image to all of your environments. Since the containers, for speed, since the containers are small images that run on top of an existing operating system, your deploys are much faster. You're not having to go back in and do extra work in order to get your items running. And then it's scalable. This is basically a direct result of the container speed. You can configure your environment such that you can deploy additional containers to handle that additional demand as you go along. And it allows you to increase that workload with ease. So again, talking some more benefits about the containers, we talked about it being rapid and efficient, builds off the container speed. Not only can you quickly scale up to meet demands, but you can also quickly recover from any failures and scale back when the demand is not there. If a container fails, it's quickly replaced by another container, or you can roll back a failed deployment very quickly. It's portable and it's consistent. So what that means is that the containers have packaged all the dependencies into the image, and once you've got that container image, you can run it anywhere. You take it to another data center, another cloud. You need to move it to a different cluster. Everything is there. So not only that, but it's consistent because it'll run the same way because you're running that same image. You're not having to tweak anything when you're moving things around to different environments. Next, it reduces your operational environment. So your infrastructure doesn't have to be static, and it shouldn't be static. You know, as you have greater demand, then you launch more containers, as we mentioned, and it will scale up and provide you with that excess capacity. When you don't need it, it scales back and it saves you that money on having to run that infrastructure when you don't need it. And you would use auto scaling to configure all of that based on what you need. And then finally, monitoring. You know, you're building off that portability and consistency, and you're allowing your containers to build standard monitor and logging into your image. And then you can push those logging logs into something like CloudWatch logs, where you can aggregate all that data, and you don't have to worry if a container dies, you're not going to lose, you know, the logs that were on that local instance. So there's just a lot of benefits with very little risk. So there are, however, some pitfalls that you should avoid or try to avoid as you are making the move from traditional deploying directly to servers onto containers. And that's basically, you expect that you're going to have to refactor your application. It's just best practice. You want to try to get your containers to basically support a microservice. So you're breaking your monolithic application up, and you want each container to perform a microservice that can either be reused or scaled back and called upon independently of each other. Okay, you don't want to just wrap up your existing application into a container, because that really defeats the point of and the benefit of your container. You want to start separating these out and having them loosely coupled microservices. So you also want to make sure you're using containers and using automation to deploy these containers and orchestrate the containers movements and scale up and scale down, etc. You don't want to have to be doing these manually. So take that into account, use auto scaling, use the clustering, etc. to try to get as much automation as you can. If it's something that you find yourself doing 2 or 3 times each month, that should be automated, especially if it's doing the same thing over and over again. And then finally, always keep security in mind. It shouldn't be an afterthought. As you're building your containers, think about how you're going to secure them and how you're going to ensure that your dependent packages are secured as well. So it goes hand in hand, and it really helps to resolve any vulnerabilities that have right there, and helps you avoid any of the pitfalls and added costs that may come with it. So keep these in mind. Okay. This time, I'd like to introduce Joe Kramer, who is Director of Engineering over with Peachjar, who's a customer of both Stratus 10 and AWS. So Joe's going to give a high level of what Peachjar is and what they do. And then I'll probably jump in at some point, and we'll just have a little fireside chat on what Peachjar has been up to.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen. Let's go here. Share. All right. Can everyone see that?
Looks good.
All right. Good. Glad. You never know. All right. Thanks for the intro, Kevin. Yes, I am the Director of Engineering at Peachjar. And I'll just give you a brief overview of what Peachjar does and what works under the hood, what we leverage with AWS. And then we'll have that little chat between Kevin and I. So I'll go to the next slide. There we go. All right. So Peachjar, our mission at Peachjar is to unite schools, communities, and parents in order to elevate student outcomes. And what that means is, school districts use Peachjar as a communication platform to connect parents to vital resources that they need to develop their child's social, emotional, and academic skills. So life-changing resources, for example, like, think suicide prevention counseling. That's pretty dramatic right there. But, other examples of community organizations are organizations like Girl Scouts or coding academies, sports, test prep, things like that. And that helps with a child's development socially, emotionally, and academically. Peachjar is in 43 states in the US. We've got about 900 districts so far. That represents about 17.5K schools. And we have a lot of community organizations on the platform as well, disseminating their information. And over 12 million parents are on our platform. So how does this work under the hood? Let's talk about that. So essentially, our journey has from the beginning started as digitizing flyers for community orgs or school flyers and distributing them out. But it's evolved over time and gotten more sophisticated. So under the hood, we're really a content provider. And For example, in this particular slide, you can see that schools can share their own information, whether it's a lunch menu or district information that parents need to know. And what they do is they upload their flyer into the system, and they select which schools are the audience. And then they do things like schedule the distribution that involves frequency, target dates, and there's a lot of sensitivity behind the scenes to local time zones and so forth. So it's pretty sophisticated in terms of schedule distribution. And then parents will receive an email based on their notification preferences. They can also see this information on flyer boards that they're hooked up to. And coming up pretty soon, we'll have a mobile app where push notifications might be involved. So this is kind of an example workflow. You may be thinking, how do community organizations fit in? They do the same kind of thing. They upload their flyers, but we also have an approval workflow baked into the system that is configurable, customizable by the school district and how they want to manage approvals, what kind of layers are involved. Obviously, information that districts pass on to parents and families, they keep an eye on what's appropriate, right? And so that approval workflow is very important. But then all the other factors like scheduling, distribution, respecting people's notification preferences all come into play to distribute to the same areas via email or the flyer board or our upcoming app that we're actually currently building. So let's talk about what's under the hood in terms of the architecture. So we're using AWS and a lot of various technologies to support our work. And let's see, how do I best describe this? We've actually managed and accomplished a migration to a new architecture. So we initially had our company running on a LAMP stack application, and when we opted to re-architect to be more scalable and performant and so forth, we moved a lot of different services and resources into the AWS infrastructure, and built a whole new platform that not only duplicated what we had before, but enhanced and improved and added to what we had before. So behind the scenes, we're leveraging Kubernetes for containers and deploying our code. And that gives us a lot of agility. And I practice a highly agile mindset with my engineering team, not only in just how they perform their work, but how we express our code. We're also leveraging SQS in order to queue up our emails that go out and so forth. It's a highly reliable service. We're using RDS in the back end for all our data and transactional data versus also other kind of reporting data. We're using Aurora Postgres as well. The reason for that, you might be interested in knowing, is that when it came to managing millions of subscriptions in our system and generating millions and millions of emails at different times and so forth, we needed to break off our subscription data encapsulated in Aurora Postgres, because we saw that performed and scaled really well, especially with how our distribution logic works and our peaks and troughs and so forth. The backend, we're using Redshift as part of our data warehouse initiative. Redshift is great for large data and a lot of analytics behind the scenes, and that's really going to feed our BI. One of my 2023 goals is to be highly data-driven as an organization in action and not just in word. And that means providing actionable information to our stakeholders so they can make business decisions. But it's also on the flip side, we have a lot of metrics that we collect when it comes to flyer distribution, email distribution that we use internally, but also provide externally to our school districts and community organizations, where they can actually derive some insight and figure out how best to manage how they disseminate their information and so forth. Lastly, we're using Kafka on the back end as well. we use Lambda serverless as well to help generate emails and some other functions. I just have to say serverless is amazing. If you haven't looked at that, check it out. And as I mentioned before, SQS is highly reliable. We're using Kubernetes mainly for how easy it is for us to manage our CI/CD. I mentioned that because we actually skipped ECS and went straight to EKS so that we could have better control and introspection. We had standardized patterns and consistency, and it helped us with just managing all the overhead with deployments. And as far as what we're doing going forward, because we continue to build things like the mobile app, we always keep an eye on what's happening behind the scenes at AWS, new services, new resources. It's always changing. It pays to pay attention. So that's my my tip there. That's our back end. There we go. So I'm here as a client to Stratus 10. It's been a pretty good, productive, fruitful relationship. We do get a lot of standardized things from Stratus 10 that helps us stay mature, continuously improve, and so on. As you can see here, we get this cloud security report from Stratus 10. Security is really important to me. It really is a combination of putting guardrails around our development process, making sure that we not only deploy code reliably and consistently, but that new individuals coming into our team can plug in without losing track of what their pathway is. But it also is important for not exposing ourselves to the risk of a data breach and safeguarding our data behind the scenes and data and services. The same thing with the Foundations benchmark. What that helps us with is ensure that we're doing everything according to standards and best practices, so that we can actually provide some reliability around our services and resources. One thing that's always in demand is being more efficient, spending less and achieving more. So that's been really handy with Stratus 10. We've actually cut costs along unused resources or resources that could be optimized based on our volume and so forth. And then Stratus 10 has helped us with special projects. And so our relationship with Stratus 10 started back in 2019, where we engaged on a special machine learning data science project, and also kind of worked on some nuts and bolts to our infrastructure, like setting up VPN, log aggregation, and so forth. And that's where it started, but it got put on a pause due to the pandemic. Everyone got impacted. And we resumed again last year in June with Stratus 10 because I actually started with Peachjar in June of last year. And we needed to have some well-versed resources come in and help us monitor our operations, give us some peace of mind around keeping the lights on and so forth. But also, having that product exposure that they have across multiple clients and recognizing different patterns would be helpful. So we started engaging on some additional projects, but more along the lines of streamlining our operations, moving some other services into AWS that we had hosted elsewhere so that I could optimize our environment and ecosystem for better agility with the team and so on. And we continue to work with Stratus 10. We have some projects upcoming in 2023 that we'll be working on. In fact, Kafka, our migration, we have a hosted service for Kafka elsewhere that we've got set up in AWS, and all we got to do now next is operationalize that. So that's it in terms of timeline and quick overview. I hope I didn't take up too much time.
You're good. You're good. So I want to jump in. So you mentioned the pandemic pause. What were the challenges that you had during the pandemic and then post-pandemic?
Yeah. So the pandemic created a lot of uncertainty and halts in the normal way of doing business right from the start, and that forced us to adjust how we run our company, and that was going lean and leaner. So for engineering, that meant having a smaller team that had to keep up with the challenges of completing this full platform migration I mentioned earlier into a new architecture on AWS and keeping the lights on. And that was pretty challenging, but luckily we had some great tools and team members to keep us efficient. As I mentioned, Kubernetes EKS helped us keep up efficiently with post-migration patching and fixes. And we were able to continue supporting the organization in all things tech support oriented. So that was great. And, once we saw a lift in the economy and the health of different organizations and the schools, we had a much healthier environment. And let's see, we were able to actually start growing, and the good work that we did during the pandemic phase not only kept us up with keeping the lights on, but we strengthened our system. We made it more bulletproof and resilient and performant along the way. And so we're in a good place, in the post-pandemic phase to actually to start growing back again and be more strategic.
Very cool. So you mentioned, EKS helped you be more efficient and recover. What were the challenges before EKS?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So pre-EKS, we had a hard time deploying software. There's a lot more friction when it came to managing a deployment, and our tendency pre-EKS was to try to bundle several updates together just to avoid the pain or the overhead of a deployment. And so, of course, the end result was we had less deployments throughout a period of time, right? So infrequent deployments, and the payloads for our deployments were bulkier. If you want to say, if you want to describe that situation, that outcome, that's pretty much not agile. So I think we wouldn't have been able to do so well during the pandemic without being agile. We managed as a small team to not only keep operations running, but we took our bug count to the single digits by the end of Q1 of this year. And I attribute that to our speed to deploy and our agile mindset.
Very cool. So now, how are you guys doing growing the team again?
Yeah, we're doing great. Like I said earlier, by being agile, we were poised to pivot and be strategic when the timing was right. And for the past year, the timing has been right. So we've been growing the team, but what I've been trying to do is grow the team in a way that's impactful. So I've added a data architect, data analyst, an automation QA engineer into the mix, into the group, in addition to a couple of full stack engineers. And the reason I was able to add those roles without, maybe throwing more bodies at coding, is because we were able to be more efficient, being lean and using the tools we had. So I'm actually looking forward to really growing our automation test library and hooking that up into our CI/CD where we really need it, and we also have a well-defined roadmap to jump onto, so that kind of engages a team. They have skin in the game with the outcomes. But growing takes time. Recruitment takes time and effort. So we're being prudent. We're being conservative about how we grow. Making sure we got good hires. And the fact that we're using a modern tech stack, we're in AWS, is a draw for good candidates. And the thing with AWS is it's such a large service offering and resource offering that people come in with various levels of awareness of what's there. So it takes time to ramp them up. So part of the challenge with growing a team is, like I said earlier, is that we're putting guardrails in our development process to help to help kind of onboard people more easily and do it safely. And that's where Stratus 10, Kevin, you guys come in. You help me with helping us put more security around things, and that results in guardrails for us. And the thing with security, which is just a pitfall when you're with AWS, is that it's so flexible, you can do whatever you want. and so if you're starting out with AWS and you're a startup, you might be tempted to get rolling quickly and just set up the basics and just kind of keep adding to it. But without forethought, you're not going to end up with something that's maintainable, or even like super robust over time, right? And that's where we're at. We're sort of in the middle right now. But that's kind of my next goal in terms of hardening that up, and that will help us with growth.
Excellent. So how are, obviously there's a lot of factors driving your decision, your infrastructure decisions. How are your customers driving your infrastructure decisions?
Oh, great question. In a couple of ways. Our customers are primarily our school districts and schools. So, demand and communication volume has driven some decisions that we've made. So, for example, I had mentioned us using Aurora Postgres to help manage kind of the peak volumes of generating appropriate emails and digests for subscribers in our system. And so that's been one part of it, and that helped performance greatly. Let's see, something that I'm sure everyone here is been exposed to is that data security and data privacy are big concerns that our customers have. In fact, every time we onboard a new school district, one of the things that I get pulled into consistently now is a data privacy agreement, a DPA. And so we need to ensure that we address any concerns that customers have around personal data and scrubbing that data. So we've got processes in place behind the scenes to do things like that. Another thing is just to make sure that they're comfortable with our security practices, that we're doing everything possible to avoid a data breach, and that if there is something that does happen, that we're prepared to communicate openly, transparently, and react quickly when an incident occurs. And that's where that logging and notifications and alerting that we're partnering on helps us with too.
Mm-hmm. So looking forward, how are you going to deal with uncertainty and identify those high value strategies?
Yeah, so definitely uncertain times coming up again, right? We're not sure how the economy is going to do in the near future. So we are being conservative while trying to continuously improve. And that's just, being able to do more with less. And I always, when I talk agile, I talk doing it lean, but doing it right. I also work really closely with my leadership team to ensure that we're aligned on the business strategy. So what we're working on is the right stuff that makes a difference. Yeah. And one of the things that really helps us is that our product team is highly integrated into the engineering team. We're active partners. They're at stand-ups with me. And it really helps the engineering team work on the right stuff and understand like the reason behind why we do things. So, that's basically our kind of going forward thing in terms of being prudent about and pragmatic about our growth.
Right. It's kind of like the pandemic was a good dry run or for the future. So yeah. So why do you outsource versus keeping things in-house?
Yeah. So obviously continuing DevOps operations is really important to us. And we have to make decisions about how we grow and what disciplines we develop in-house. So it kind of makes sense for us to grow internally in the areas that continue to yield us results with building our secret sauce, our new products with domain knowledge internal. So when it comes to DevOps, I find that it's actually more efficient and cost effective to have a DevOps team that already has that community of practice around DevOps and all the tools out there, resources out there, and work with you as a partner. So that gives us operational support, but it also gives us guidance and assistance on joint projects. You recognize patterns that we might not be able to recognize, even if I hired in-house teams. So it keeps us flexible, especially in uncertain times. So that's why we continue.
Yeah. AWS has a term where they say, let us do the undifferentiated heavy lifting for you and let you focus on what you do best. That's very true. So, well, thank you very much, Joe.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah. So next I want to segue over and introduce John Boynton. He's with AWS EdStart, and John's going to give us a little overview of what EdStart is and what funding, which we love, options there are, and training resources, and how to get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Everybody, which screen are you seeing? Kevin, can you help me out there?
The speaker notes side.
Of course they're seeing the speaker notes. That's the way it always works. How's that? Are we doing better?
Perfect.
All right. So first off, huge thanks to Catherine, yourself, Kevin, the entire Stratus team, also Joe for Peachjar and sharing your story. I know we've been here for a little bit, so I just want to quickly give folks an understanding of what AWS EdStart is, and then I think there's a few questions that are in the chat that we can then turn it back to the broader team. So again, my name's John Boynton. I'm a business development manager here for AWS EdStart. I've been with AWS just over 9 years now, and I've been in multiple ed techs throughout my career before, and then also working closely with here at AWS. So I'll do some quick things on why we started AWS EdStart. Is we realize and we know that there are limited resources that are available for ed techs. It's also a really challenging landscape. And what I mean by that is whether it's sales cycles, whether it's, Joe mentioned the data privacy and the rules that are required for that, around student data, parent data, et cetera. Whether it's the international markets and what's required there, or just what are the devices that students are using. Folks who are in ed tech know it could be almost anything. The pandemic has certainly put everybody onto a shift. And so, there's a lot of different factors that go into helping ed techs become successful. The other thing, it's a really disjointed ecosystem. There's lots of resources. There's smaller amount maybe of really good resources. So if we can try to bring together some of those resources to help a founder and their team be able to go faster, maybe that's making a connection to Stratus 10. Maybe that's connection to another accelerator that exists, or other leaders in the field. We want to be able to do that. And then also we realize that there's a lot of really great AWS specific solutions that are incredibly powerful for ed tech. So Joe was talking about, I think you mentioned SNS for messaging of parents and students, right? Thinking about all the data and the dashboards that students need to see and parents need to see and teachers and administrators. There's lots of ways that we just realized that we could help. And so we want to do that, and we want to do it in an ed tech specific way to help you achieve your mission, which most often is to improve student outcomes. So again, we are AWS's virtual accelerator for startup education technology companies. And I want to really pause on the word accelerator there, right? We want to help it make it easier for you and make it easier for you to go faster to achieve your mission. As Kevin mentioned the undifferentiated listening. We could apply that here too, right? Even going beyond serverless, right? We can make a connection for you, and that's going to help you, take 3 months off something. Let's do that. Our basic tenets are we want to engage and support our ed techs early, consistently as you're building the solutions that you're building. We really want to be focused on those innovative technologies, learning technologies that are impacting those student and academic outcomes. And like I mentioned, we want to make it easier to find resources, not only at AWS, but around the world as well. We are available in over 40 countries. So there's a list of where we are at the application, and I'll share that link here in a minute as well. I will mention we've got 2 different tiers. So our first tier, I like to describe this is for the earliest stage startup. Sometimes it's just a founder or 2 noodling around on an idea. Am I crazy enough to get into this market segment, into this space? Maybe they had ideas at the kitchen table during the pandemic. We've certainly been seeing a lot of that. The second phase, and so those are innovators less than 2 years old, less than $1 million in revenue. They've got an idea, but they may not have customers yet. Right? They may have a minimal viable product, or that's something that they're working towards and they want to use AWS to help them get there. The other side, or the next level, if you will, is our membership tier. So this is less than 5 years old, less than 10 million in revenue. Typically, these customers, these ed techs, right, where their business is focused on education, they're a little more established. They may not have a ton of customers, but they typically have customers, right? They're close to a product market fit, so to say. So this is our members tier. Again, for the more established type ed techs, criteria is less than 5 years old, less than 10 million. I think I mentioned that, but just in case. There's some great benefits that we provide our innovators. So we have a community portal, which our founders can log into. Got all sorts of meetups, aka happy hours, when we're at different events that you're welcome to come. Provide all sorts of different thought leadership type materials. We do provide a lot of one-to-many technical trainings and things like that. Not in the weeds, no hands-on keyboards the way that Kevin and his team do, but we definitely provide some training so people can just learn, right? Learn what's possible. And then we provide $500 in AWS promotional credit. For those of you unfamiliar with AWS, $500, especially when you don't have any scale, can go a really, really long way. There's a great free tier that allows you to play around with things. And then the $500 can really, really help you maybe experiment with some machine learning, fire up a database, right? Do some containers, et cetera. And pretty minimal as well. So you should be in pretty good shape for this tier. Our members, it's a bit broader, right? And it's quite a bit more resources, as these are more established companies. They're able to run with it. So again, access to our portal. We have pitch events, we provide mentorship, we've got founders dinners, where this is just founders from companies where we can build that community. Where we want to make introductions to folks. We have a global builders conference, all sorts of great further technical things, because candidly, your architecture is more technical and more support. Again, no hands-on keyboard, but we can help you with architecture reviews and things like that, or refer you to folks who can help, like Stratus 10 or others. We do provide promotional credit as well, typically, and this really depends on where you are as a business, as a company. Are you a math curricular gaming company that has, already has 50,000 students using it on a daily basis, versus a more static website type company? Two very different types of requirements, and we want to meet you where you are to get you basically what you need, so that we can, again, help you accelerate and do things that you want to be able to do. Also work very closely with our members in the publicity area. So if we can write some blogs, social media, founders corners, things like that. As Joe mentioned, right, is, it's good to have great architecture because you can potentially start to attract some engineers. Our members use this publicity not only to potentially, woo new customers, but also to potentially make potential engineers or other personnel interested in the really innovative and cool work that you're doing. So lots of ways to be thinking about that. Doesn't hurt with investors either. Here, just a quick slide of some of our members around the world, really doing some amazing things. Bamboo Learning, for example, really doing some things on the forefront of voice technology, using my friend in the cylinder who's next to me, who I won't say her name right now. Royby is a childhood robot. They happen to also sell on Amazon.com. Nimula, financial literacy. Octopus BI is based in Asia Pacific, doing a lot of data analytics. And the list goes on here with some just really great companies doing that. I talked about resources. We also have an amazing group of organizations that support EdTech, specifically EdTechs in this space. And these are often very business focused, right? So these are other accelerators, sometimes investment teams, sometimes the Learn platform, for example, here is really focused on the K-12 space, around efficacy and helping prove that you have efficacy, which is critical, right? If you're going to unlock funding. So as John Gamba, if you guys don't know John, he's the director of entrepreneur residence at the University of Pennsylvania, Catalyst School for Education. And he really talks about being able to provide insights to the overall field. We actually been publishing a EdTech startup guide for the last 2 years. So do a quick internet search and you'll find that really quickly about some of the latest trends in EdTech. We are on social media and all those good things, so feel free to reach out at our website. I've even made it easier. I created a QR code if you have your phones, and I think we'll be sharing some links later. But I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here with us, also Kevin, Joe, Catherine, and the rest of the team.
Great. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you.
So now we're going to do a quick, everybody see my screen again? All right. So really quick, we just, want to emphasize, it's good if you're doing things on your own and stuff, but let us help you accelerate that. Just like EdTech can help you shave months off of your development cycle. Stratus 10 has the expertise, et cetera, to help you focus on what you do best and not have to worry about the underlying pieces and stuff. I also want to let you all know that we do have a couple offers and assessments that we can do for you. One is the managed DevOps service for startups. So you want to get jump on things. We'll help set up your CI/CD pipeline real quick and get it all up and running for you. The other is if you already have something up and running, we can do a well-architected review. And once we do the assessment, find high-risk items that AWS recommends you remediate, and you go through the remediation process with us. AWS gives you $5,000 in AWS credits to help run your new infrastructure. So both are really good options to take advantage of. So QR code here as well for anybody that would like. And then let's jump to questions.
Right, Kevin, thanks so much. We are running over on time here, and I believe we've answered all the questions directly via Q&A. Just to point it out, we can answer it for everyone just because it was a good question. It was a question for Joe. Your snapshot was super helpful. It's a bit daunting, the number of services you're managing. How big is your engineering team? Joe, if you just want to take a moment and answer that, we'll get that on here for everyone.
Yeah, I put that down there on the Q&A panel, but yeah, basically, after this past year of growing, I currently have 2 front-end engineers, 2 back-end engineers, 2 full-stack engineers, 1 QA automation engineer, 1 data architect, 1 data analyst, and 1 tech support person on my team supporting the business. Believe it or not, during the pandemic, we had 5 total people, and that was 4 engineers and 1 tech support person. And we were managing all those services during the pandemic with that small crew. And once we brought on Stratus 10, that gave us a lot of breathing room there.
All right, well, thank you. I think it's time we wrap up our webinar. Thank you, everyone, for your time today.